David says, get the
It's
hot guys while they're fucked up on drugs. They
Yes,
won't notice how ugly you are. It's dark, they're confused, they're dehydrated.
that is my number one pro tip. Hello, and welcome to Off Christopher Street, the podcast where we look into the archives of the gay magazine Christopher Street as a window onto the gay life of the past and the gay discourse of the present. I am David Sessions, and I am joined for our very first episode by my co-host and fellow historian, Blake Smith. Today, we are discussing the politics of hotness, why hotness, attractiveness, physical beauty have for so long been central to gay male culture and, at the same time, a perpetual source of unease and controversy. We are super excited to be releasing our first episode, and if you would like to get future episodes, you can find Off Christopher Street on Spotify, on Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts, and give us a follow. You can subscribe to our Substack at christopherstreetmag.substack.com, where you will also get additional text and commentaries as we have time to produce them. Or you can visit our beautiful website at christopherstreetmag.com and explore other articles in Christopher Street that we may be talking about in future episodes. And now, here is our conversation about the politics of hotness. Since we don't know when this is going to come out, it's perhaps worth noting that while we're recording this, what we might call hotness discourse is at a fever pitch, seeming the never end of magazine stories about weight loss on GLP drugs. There's articles about how everyone is injecting themselves with off-label peptides. More and more think pieces about whether body positivity is dead. And most recently, the young influencer Clavicular broke containment from his world of incel-adjacent looks-maxers, aka young men who are pursuing hotness at any cost, and is widely, if a bit oddly, being treated as somehow embodying our cultural moment. And so Clavicular has been on this, the last couple of weeks, he's been on this media tour with his awkward autistic self, being profiled by the New York Times, appearing on the Adam Friedland show, while explaining his cocktail of off-label drugs and plastic surgeries, as well as his bleak social Darwinist ideology in which nothing matters except one's conformity to a very precisely elaborated set of beauty standards. And if that weren't enough, we also apparently have still not resolved the question of whether we collectively are having enough sex or indeed whether we are having any at all. But we are not going to talk.
So the discourse wonder is being hot okay, and are people fucking?
Is it? I mean, you would think that if the problem is that people are not fucking enough, that being hot might be okay.
No, we need to lower our standards until everyone is fucking. That's
okay. Is that? But what if no one's fucking because everyone's too ugly? What if we need to look smacks?
I still feel some few hot gay guys are doing their part to raise the average. For while doxy prep still works, before the antibiotic resistant STIs catch up with us. But in 1983, one man dared to ask these questions well before our current age of discourse, and he is George Stambolian. Do you want to introduce him?
Sure, I will do it this time. So George Stambolian was a professor of French and comparative literature at Wellesley College. He was a contributor to the gay magazine Christopher Street, from which we take our name, and he's mostly, stood out to us for his. I know he's important for a lot of reasons that we will hopefully have the occasion to talk about, including his kind of pioneering work creating a canon of post-Stonewall gay literature. But one of the things that he did was a series of interviews in Christopher Street with different types of gay men, and they're just these like really wide ranging conversations with gay guys that he tried to present as archetypes. So there's where give me some examples. Like
So there's
what are the ones that's
interview with the bottom, whom he calls an analyst. There's with the drag
an
queen.
analist? Okay, so it's an analyst, but that's such an odd word that no one says. It sounds
I should start identifying as an analyst.
you think analyst when you read it, which is what reminded me of the Arrested Development analysis.
Oh, that's right. Yeah. Sort of a Tobias Funke. I mean, there's some kind of Tobias vibes in the bottom. Yeah, with a drag queen, a black guy,
A black guy. There's interview with a black guy.
a fetishist, and a masochist. These are different.
There is the interview with a gay father, right? Or a
Yeah, there's an
patriarch
interview with a gay dad,
with an
and with a rich
entrepreneur.
guy, with a guy who like owns a prominent bathhouse. So it's the 10 kinds of gay guys.
But they're sometimes very funny, sometimes weird. They're all little snapshots of gay culture. And the one we're going to talk about relates to all of this because it is the interview with a hot and handsome man, as the line on the cover says it, which is points to whoever wrote that headline for distinguishing between hot and handsome, because those are not the same thing, although some people incorrectly use them interchangeably.
I think of handsome as being mostly in the face.
Correct.
Someone can be someone can be hot actually precisely because they have a great body and an ugly face. So we've talked about Ryan D. Peterson.
Yes.
Peterson with all E's. Where
You don't say people's names.
Well, I don't. He's created a Wikipedia for himself, so he's a prominent author. I love anyone who wrote their own Wikipedia.
Yeah, I've done that. It hurt my feelings at the time. It was marked for speedy deletion.
They clocked you and me. This is a not famous bitch, right? I haven't checked
like
if Ryan's is still up. And Ryan, if you're listening, love you. Love your work. Good to see you. Where was this going? Yeah. An interview with a hot and handsome man to answer the perennial question, what's it like to be hot?
As it says in the table of contents, what is it really like to be gorgeous? George Stambolian finds out for us. And we don't know who the hot and handsome man is. There's enough details in here that we could probably, if we were in historian mode or looking in the archives, we could probably figure it out. His partner took some of the nude photos of him that appear in the article. So his partner is named. He is also on the cover of the magazine. So why don't you since people can't see it, why don't you describe what's on the cover?
We have muscle daddy with beautiful pecs. So this is something we could talk about, at some later moment, but this is a great age of the discovery of male pecs. So there's a line in Dancer from the Dance where I think Sutherland, who you might imagine is like a wispy post-Twinkie queen, but is actually built, we learned from this line, says that he has bigger breasts than his mother.
Put a pin in that because I think he's talking about someone else.
Is he talking about someone else?
But it's worth noting that joke, Halloran often repeats himself. That joke appears in at least 2 Andrew Halloran novels, if not more.
We love a queen who recycles.
But yes, I have also read things about how that was a change. It wasn't always normal for guys to find big pecs hot, and that was a change in the 1970s.
Yeah, and the big, clearly defined, and the photo is us as if we're sucking his cock, looking up at him. So we see the pert nipples, we see the big pecs, and we see this gorgeous golden sort of blonde russet pubic hair. It's so abundant. I don't know if you're a pubes guy. I do. I love Asians, but their pubic hair is a little weird. So I miss this kind of pubic hair. It's like Jason in the Golden Fleece.
Disclaimer: Blake is dating an Asian, so he can say things like that.
You can say anyone can say things. They're just, as Trump once said, they're just words. They're just words, folks.
They're just words.
And then at the top of his hair, he has beautiful golden curls. So he's,
we cut off right about the line level of his dick. There's just this expansive, pelt of golden pubes, and then we look up to his chest and see the bottom of his chin and his golden curls. He has a kind of a mane and a very
And he's not looking down at us. We're looking at him. He's looking off into the distance, thinking about what it's like to be hot.
because so they analyze this photo that's on the cover in the story. So we might have occasion to talk about that. Okay, so they talk a little bit about the setup of the interview. They're at Hot and Handsome Man's house. At one point, Stambolian remarks that there are mirrors everywhere. They're filming the interview, so they he talks about that kind of right off the bat, that there's a camera rolling. And Stambolian's very, he's a literary critic. He's also interested in visual art and the male nude and photography and art. He's like edited some work on that. He's always very attentive to perception and the way things look, the way things are staged. It's one of the things I like about his writing, because even when he's talking, he's having this kind of graphic sexual interview with someone. He's thinking about like their interaction and how they're looking at each other, and he sort of brings that refined visual perspective to everything he thinks about.
Yeah, so I mean, Stambolian has a few really great articles, like on Dwayne Mickles, on the art and politics of the male nude. He teaches a class on this to Wellesley, to the girls there, and I wonder what they make of it. Like, I've seen the syllabuses, but I have no idea, what the student evaluations were. And Stambolian is really interested in how this guy thinks about being hot. So in the book version, so there's a 1984 book that gathers up all the interviews he did with men, Christopher Street, from 80 to 83. And in the book version...
and we should say, like, if people are interested in that is called what?
Male Fantasies, Gay Realities.
Male Fantasies, Gay Realities. That's pretty easy to find online. Like, you can read it from the Open Library has it. There's places where you can flip through it. And we're also putting these interviews on the website.
And I mean, it's worth looking at David's website, because you get the photos, which sadly the book version doesn't include all the fun photos.
Right. Yeah. The
magazine version.
A lot of these have good photos, and they are not in the book.
But in the book, Stambolian reveals that he'd been fantasizing for a while about interviewing a hot guy, and friends kept setting him up with guys who they thought were hot for him to interview. And he's like, no, this isn't right. And he finally finds this guy at like an AIDS testing thing. Stambolian, I think, is drawn to this guy because this hot guy has so much to say about his own feelings of being hot and the way that he gets off on looking at himself and other people looking at him. So I'm sure there are many hot guys walking around who are just like enjoying being hot but not thinking about it so much. But this guy has a really strong relationship to his hotness. He has really thought about it.
Right. He's one of the people who have thought about it a lot, which is, it's kind of a rare thing. Most people, hotness doesn't generally correlate with thoughtfulness or even intelligence.
So yeah, it's interesting that Stambolian doesn't bring this up at all, but I think we had then and we have now a really strong cultural fantasy of the blonde beast, or the Chad. Like, Chad is happy because he does not have self-consciousness. And part of being like a beautiful person, we might imagine, is not having reflexivity. Reflexivity makes us miserable. I think this is like a terrible, pernicious, like really, really bad, lame.
Yeah.
But it is...
Yeah, or even if you're like a bookish or intellectual, or artist type, you can flatter yourself that your inner depth and your perceptiveness and what makes you smart and good is your alienation from your body, from the world, or like you have a kind of beautiful suffering because you don't get to be hot and like live in the world in a normal way.
Yeah. And then we see people flip that.
True.
I don't know if you read Jordan Castro's stupid essay about how he started working out, but like ugly straight guy starts working out and then imagines he's tapped into something that no one has ever discovered before. He's no longer a bookish loser. Now he's an ugly guy who lifts. And he converts to Christianity and quits heroin and then, is in Harper's and has so many thoughts about this. And gay guys have been knowing that you can get hot, right? And you can get hot at any number of ages. And so, yeah, this guy, the hot man interviewed by Stambolian, has a kind of reflexivity about it because he'd spent his 20s married to a woman, in a relationship with another woman. And it was only a few years before the interview, at the age of like 29, that he comes to New York, and he'd been working out for a few years, so his body was ready, and he's hitting the clubs and bars and is getting attention. And it's all new. He's taking it in. And yeah, there's something very special about that, I mean, I think still is a possibility in gay life.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that you and I think people still think this sometimes, that um can have a fatalistic, even gays, a fatalistic perception of, like, getting old means looking a certain way. You're kind of imagining, like, attractiveness as if you're either born with it or you're not, which we are to an extent. But being around gay guys for any length of time, you realize that, like, people can get attractive, like, at almost any age, and, like, at surprisingly old old ages, and, like, can suddenly, like, look better than they ever had.
You yourself are a gay guy who had a glow up in his 30s. So, you can relate to the interviewee.
Yeah, so I wonder if I do relate to the interview, the guy in that way, and I wonder if that is the source of his reflectiveness about it, because I was not. So I've probably said this before, but just in case I haven't, I'll recap. I came out of my 30s. I had not, I was fine with my appearance. I wasn't necessarily insecure about it. I was, I have kind of a vain family, and, like, was, liked fashion and liked thinking about how I looked, but I never had an experience of, like, thinking I was hot, or, like, really being, I was married pretty young. So I wasn't, like, I didn't really date, or wasn't in a setting where I was used to, where I was even thinking about, like, how people reacted to me, or whether people were attracted to me or not. So all of that was new in my 30s, and I had, because I was, I had this mindset of that I was coming out late, and that I was already too old to, to be gay. The surprise of, like, glowing up, kind of fitting in really well into that world, people finding me attractive, was very exciting, and very kind of like it, like this sort of, I don't know, like a second youth, a second puberty. People often talk about that, when you have a sort of midlife crisis, or a divorce, or anything like that, and it creates a sense of, or at least for me, and I think that may be why this guy in the story is thoughtful about it, of, well, I'm kind of looking back at my life in a different way, or there's all these things that I have to learn because I was rather blind to them before, and now they're suddenly, like, available.
Right. So, I mean, one of the things that comes out really strongly in the interview is the pleasure that this guy has been taking in the last few years. I mean, it's really only like 3 years or so, because he comes to New York in 78, but it takes him a year or so to be comfortable with being gay. And then the interview is in February of 83. So he's just, like, been a hot gay guy for a few years, and he's now, like, 34. New consciousness of being hot, and then the way that changes even his own relationship to his body. So he's talking about admiring his own butt. He's talking about enjoying looking at himself in the mirror, which he hadn't done in his 20s, taking photos of himself, having his partner take photos of him, and really getting off on the scenarios that he can have with other people, either staring at him, worshiping him, or like there's a very funny thing of, like, him thinking a lot about, like, going to a bar and people trying not to look at him, and kind of getting
Mhm.
off on, oh yeah, I'm so hot that you don't even want to look at me.
You want to acknowledge that you're, yeah, he talks about that, where, like, I know they saw me, and I can tell by the way they're acting that they're trying not to look.
Yeah, I mean, this would be like if the really hot guys on Grindr had known that I blocked them because they were too hot. Like, I'm glad they don't get, like, a notification, right, that says, like, some loser has blocked you because they can't bear to look at you. They don't need that. They don't need it.
We should talk about that, like, people being too hot. That's the subject I wanna touch on. But this sort of, the way we're talking so far, sort of makes him sound, like, very conceited, and I don't think he actually is. So he's a very interesting person. Like, one of the things that he wasn't always this way. He kind of tells us that he only gradually embraced the idea of, other people's feedback, like other people telling him that he was attractive. And he said, I'll read a couple of quotes. So
Yeah,
he
yeah.
said, I had been brought up to believe in hierarchies of value, for almost everything except physical beauty. So I was discouraged from feeding off my looks. it was considered a dangerous vanity, an attachment to the self that was not uh, supposed to be indulged in. So I thought that was interesting as someone who grew up in fundamentalist Christianity, where it's, there was a lot of talk about like you're not supposed to be trying to be looked at or like it was worldly. My parents would say like when I wanted to like wear trendy clothes or have trendy hairstyles, like you're just trying to look like the world and draw other people's attention to you. And, there's a kind of, discouragement of that. I don't know if that was true for you, like in your...
I was not an attractive child, so that really wasn't an issue.
Well, I'm not saying I was attractive.
Like no one had to discourage me from like people had to tell me not to be like a know-it-all and an asshole. But they didn't have to tell
That
me to
tracks.
be less invested in my physical appearance because I looked, I had to get on Accutane as a teenager.
I had pretty bad acne too.
So yeah, basically until the Accutane had done its course, that like the acne was already giving me all the humility that I could need. But I did like the life story he tells is interesting because it's a kind of reverse of, we might imagine that like you're supposed to mature into looking past the physical. But his life story
Yeah.
is like, no, I grew up in this kind of Puritan family where like, you're not supposed to pay attention to things like the body. That's not serious, how hot people are. And he says, yeah, like for most of his 20s, when people would say that he was attractive, or even when he started dating as a gay guy, he would say, yeah, okay, but then let's move on past that. Like, I don't want to luxuriate in
Yeah.
your attraction to me. I want you to get to know the real me. And the real me is someone different than my body, which, as he says, like, he didn't think of that as something that he had any control over. He didn't think of how he looked as representative of anything about who he really was.
Mm-hmm.
And then, yeah, but
then they talk about how this has changed. So George Stambolian says, looking at you now, it seems obvious that all of that has changed. And he says, and now I do feed on it because not everyone has it, and because I have to make it with what I have. Maybe something of the Puritan is still there because I feel that I shouldn't waste what I have, that I should enjoy it and benefit from it, and should try to arrange for other people to enjoy it and benefit from it too.
I have to use my sexual capital.
Yeah. Yeah. And maybe that is, I think part of that was, for me, maybe for him, a fact of feeling behind or coming to it late and like being pleasantly surprised. Like I'm thrilled and happy that I still get to be attractive, but it's also like, I'm also already old and it's not going to last forever. So I need to make the most of it.
It's a funny injunction. Like, I must overcome Puritanism. I must make the use of what I have. I must get as much like enjoyment as I can. Although, like, what exactly does that look like? And there's always a tension between the like, I must enjoy as a kind of project. I had this very strongly like in college where like, my version of this is like a twink was like, I think I had thought in high school, like, no one's going to love someone as thin and mean as me. And turns out men love that. Like there's a still powerful kind of narrative where like, like kind of opposite number, like some mask guy who's like on the lacrosse team and is sort of butch and basic wouldn't want to be with like bookish, nerdy, somewhat irascible me. And that's simply not true. Girls, don't give up hope. They love it. And where was this going? But then it also felt like, yeah, maybe 18, 19, like I need to have as much sex as possible in order to dismantle systems of something or other. Like there's some kind of, like I couldn't just enjoy it. There's like an imperative to do something with it, which is, as this guy points out, yeah, somehow still being actually puritanical.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Fortunately, I never had, I was coming to it when I was already like disillusioned with politicizing everything. So I never had any illusion that it was like dismantling patriarchy.
You've never been a freedom fighter in the sexual revolution?
Oppressive systems. But I did have and I still do see it as a little bit of a fuck you to my, to my life, my previous life. What it stole from me, even though I'm fine with it. I'm not bitter about it.
I think that's the biggest nut of all, when you can be like, fuck you, Dad. Which that's not really now part of it doesn't feel transgressive in that.
No, yeah, believe it or not, like I've kind of never held it against religion or my family. I just kind of, I don't blame anyone except myself kind of for not, for my failures.
Oh, so it's fuck you, David. That's
Yeah.
a thinker.
Yeah, it's or it's just like more like a celebration of like a triumph over myself. Like that's
Well, so yeah, one thing that I'm interested in, like the scene of him being worshipped in an elevator. So there's this guy who he kept running into on the street who how does he describe him? A little middle-aged man who liked to hang out on my block in the afternoons. He was always well dressed in a suit and tie and looked quite jolly, really, so he sounds a bit fat. I guess he thought I was a hustler because at least twice a month he would solicit me in a very respectful and earnest way. Well, one summer afternoon, I went out wearing black shorts, sneakers, and a tank top, and there he was, dressed in a nice cream-colored suit with his hat pushed back off his forehead like a little ace reporter, hot on my story.
my story.
So, one, this is just sort of a delicious framing, and he lets this middle-aged guy in the suit not come up to his apartment, but come into his apartment building, ride up the elevator, which is like 30 stories. And during the time of the elevator's ascent, the guy can jack off while he pulls his tank top up to his neck. And the guy nuts sometime before the 30th floor. I don't know how fast elevators were in those days. The elevator descends. The guy says, thank you. He's so grateful. And the hot guy feels like, I did a real mitzvah, I'm a great guy.
I don't know how I missed all the details in this story. Wow. Okay, yeah. So he basically, yeah, they go up and down 30 floors. The guy jerks off, like he pulls up his shirt, pulls his shorts down a little bit. The guy comes, and that's it.
And before we think about worshiping, which is something I think Stambolian is. So Stambolian has some great diary entries from 79, 80 about worshiping, being worshipped that I posted on Substack. Stambolian himself was pretty hot, by the way. He was a dad by that point. He was a DILF, so he's hot in that way.
He obviously was, because this guy, like when he describes how he met him, this guy like obviously was like agreeing to fuck him before they decided to do the interview. So
yeah,
like
he has a good body. He's got a mustache. He's Armenian. He's like a little bit swarthy, but the interviewee is a bit of a queen. So when they meet, he's reading a Betty Davis biography, and that he picks up on this detail of the cream-colored suit, that he finds that delicious, that like a sort of Tom Wolfe figure, maybe real Tom Wolfe, I don't know.
I did not make that association, but yes, a reporter
New
in
York
a cream-colored suit, yeah.
But he's got an eye for fashion. He loves the great ladies of cinema. And when Stambolian asks him like what he likes about himself physically and what he doesn't like about himself, what he doesn't like is his high voice. So he is a queen. Worshipping. I mean, the magazine cover invites us to worship.
So let's talk about, tells a story about the guy in the elevator. That's partly in the context of like the ways that you can play with the hierarchy of being hot, of like being hotter than other people, and the way that they react to you, like the ways that people are intimidated by you, but you sometimes are turned on by like that, or letting them have it, or
because the classic, not thinking about it model is, I find you attractive, you find me attractive, so we're going to have sex. But that's elementary school stuff, that's 101. Like,
that's boring.
Yeah. What can be really hot is, I think you're disgusting. Or like, I feel disgusting. I think you're so hot that if you just let me smell your pubes, please, for the 30 seconds this elevator ride is going to take, that's all I need.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, like I can't think of a specific instance at the moment, but I have gotten that like in Publix, like, can I just do X? Or like, can I just touch this? Or can I just like lick you here? And I'm always like, yes, I find it hot. Like, even if I'm not attracted to the person.
Is there an especially, because you have some semi-professional experience of this kind of attention?
It's expected, like you are that's
Okay,
explicitly a
I see. Yeah, yeah,
performance.
yeah. Whereas the
That's
guy
you're
coming up to
explicitly
you,
a
like, out of
performance.
the blue, "Can I please sniff your pubes?"
You
That's more intriguing. Yeah.
Right. In that setting, you are by definition, you are kind of elevated over people. You're put in a position of, you're supposed to be hot. But I'm talking more just like a random person coming up to you or yeah.
And this guy is able to frame it, at least to himself, as also sort of charitable act. Like he has a social obligation to spread his hotness, not just to hold on to it for himself, but to let other people enjoy it. There's a great scene in the this French movie with Catherine Deneuve, Potiche, where she plays the wife of a factory owner, and she has to go negotiate with the striking workers, and she puts on all of her jewels, and her children are like, "No, mama, like, don't wear."
It's been
No,
so
no,
long. I
children,
barely
it's
remember
for
this
the
movie.
workers that I wear them. They can see.
Enfin, vous n'avez tout de même pas l'intention de vous présenter à l'usine dans cette tenue. Ça, c'est de la provocation.
Mais au contraire, c'est pour honorer les ouvriers. C'est pour ça que j'ai mis tous mes bijoux. Après tout, sans eux, je n'en aurais pas. C'est comme bien normal qu'ils en profitent un peu.
I love that, like, I don't know if you were able to convince yourself that.
Well, so, sometimes people will be like overly intimidated by someone they find attractive, or they'll be overly apologetic for like bumping into you or like staring at you or whatever. And my reaction to that is always like, I did all this work to like look like this.
Right, that's why I did
It would be
No,
awful.
thank you
It would be
for
awful.
noticing.
Yeah, thank you for noticing. It would be awful of me to like, be mean to you for noticing.
I guess this is a shame. One category of the 10 interviews Stambolian did, not one was with a twink. I find twinks in general not well represented in the pages of Christopher Street.
Yeah, I feel like that was a thing that kind of came later. You think they were trying to like dissociate from the image of pederasty or something,
It
or
may
just
also
like
be that twinks don't have so much to say. Denny does this great book, Lovers, where they're both pretty young. They're in their mid to late 20s.
right?
But then he does a
They're not
follow-up
they're not old.
interview book, Decent Passions, where the gay couple is like two 22-year-olds, and they're both morons. They are like so stupid.
Yeah, right. Yeah, like you read that interview and you're like, this is actually not helpful. Like you can't actually learn anything from this. The same way that I skipped the post on AGB, which is Reddit, Ask Gay Bros, when it's like, crisis, dilemma, and then I'm like, male 19. I'm just like, oh, never mind. Skip.
Right, that's the hard thing, neither of us are chicken hawks, I guess, but like I don't know how they do it. I guess they just dissociate while the kids are talking. But for me, like when I was in, like college years, like my mid-20s, when I would like go to the gay beach in Chicago and like lay out in my shorts in the summer, and like older guys would hit on me, part of it's like, okay, delicious attention, but it's also like, if I go back to your apartment to enjoy the view or, see your etchings, will I be murdered? Like it is something closer to the experience of being a woman, where like the fun of being hot has a little bit of what's going to happen to me. Whereas like, if you're like a 30-something, like built gay guy, attention to your hotness like has no element of like, I mean, they might like
Yes.
learn your address or something. I don't know if you've ever worried about like people following you home.
No, like I've like more I'm honestly like more worried about and I've had that happen, like people post things about you on social media, or like a crazy person that you didn't realize was crazy, like just posting a text from you, or stuff like that. I would say I'm more worried about that, like about just people being crazy. And like
It's true that hot guys now, even not hot, but like I love LPSG, Mail General, Data Lounge, and they will find, like, if you are a Barry's instructor and you have done sex work, this is known on Mail General. They have found your rent men. They know the rates. They found your old nudes from, whatever cam horse site you were using. They have the Xtube account. And is your OnlyFans worth it? They know. You can't overcharge. They have the receipts.
yeah. Honestly, I'm like more worried about like, even though I don't have any of that stuff out there. I thankfully was smart enough not to do that. I'm honestly more worried about, people being, some digital thing happening. But in general, I think people are too worried about that.
Well, right now one can
People are like,
say, it's all AI. It's all fake.
right. Oh, true. Well, I'm always like, people's like, well, what if like someone records me and they have a video of me having sex? And I'm like, okay, what are they going to do with it? Who cares?
Well,
Like
hopefully I
they,
look good.
they
That
can,
would be my, I hope it's not one of the ones where I shit the bed.
it's
I
not
hope
going to
it's not
be,
that.
it's not going to be breaking news in the New York Times. I promise you.
If Peter Thiel has kept any stories about him being a messy, I'm sure he has, blown. I'm sure he's had a blowout and befouled some sheets, but he's keeping that out of the tabloids. But okay, worshiping is also connected to these issues of hierarchy and inequality in the gay community.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so before we move on to like the question of hierarchy and how that connects to like politics and the way that persists as a kind of troubled issue in gay culture, what about they talk about this kind of fun element where are there, like, I think Stambolian asked the guy, like, you're a hot guy, like everyone agrees you're hot, like, are there people that are intimidating to you? So I was going to ask you, like, have you ever experienced that? Has there ever been someone who like either you avoided because you thought they were too hot for you, or you were like in the act of having sex with them and you were just like terrified or feeling intimidated because of that?
Oh, yes. So for the latter, no, never. I've never like gotten into a sexual situation with someone because this comes up in the interview that someone is actively having sex with him, but is kind of hung up on how
Yes,
hot he
right. Yeah,
is.
yeah.
He's
The
like
guy who
unable
can't.
to get out of the voyeuristic mode because there is something maybe about hot people where we want to just like look at them and actually
Mhm.
maybe not even move into the sex act. So like,
Yeah,
part
right.
part of the worshiping the hot guy is there's an element even of control over that where like I want to have like the pure pleasure of looking and not get caught up in like having to perform. No, I've never experienced that with someone. The one time that I ever threw someone a pity fuck, he ended up having like literally a 2-inch penis, and then I missed the last train home and had to stay over, and he snored really loud. And then I found out later
No.
from a mutual friend that he had gotten me into bed by using kind of sad sack routine. Like he was having trouble with his boyfriend and his mom was coming to town and blah, 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 blah. And it was Christmas. So,
No.
but apparently he does this all the time and he cleans up. Like the sad sack routine is very successful.
Yeah, and like yeah, people aren't as people fall for that. People fall for scams or for, bits like that, and it makes you realize that like, gays are not as horrible as people say. Like,
But
they do
I
feel
mean,
sorry
it's,
for you.
since then I closed my heart. This was like age 22. I was like, I will never be generous again. I will only sleep with guys I'm actually attracted to. Well, like, right.
I
My
think though
French
the thing that was
ex.
blackpilling for me was not that, but like the people who would like, supposedly be outside your door, like, and then just block you, or they would leave and block you immediately. I just could not comprehend that one at first.
Yeah. So, I mean, I guess like I think of these people as, and I mean, I myself, in my days of singleness would be like, oh, I'm totally going to have sex with you. And it's like, I'm already masturbating. So yeah, if am I gonna go somewhere or am I gonna,
Yeah, you're gonna actually stop and get out, get dressed. No, if you're a pro, you can tell like this person's already jerking off. Like, there's no way. There is- uh,
by asking too
I
many
did have a,
questions,
I
wanting
did
to
have
see
a,
more pics.
I did have a
Um,
grinder
I
catfish for a while who I think was the same person, but was like would just make fake accounts and try to because I and always use I eventually caught on and like started just looking up pics every time, and they were always OnlyFans or like from Twitter. So he kind of like knew what I was into, and he would just use that to like chat with me and then like block me as soon as like we were supposed to meet up.
That's such a compliment. I mean, it's a compliment to have one's photos used for a fake account that catfishes others. It's a compliment to be catfished oneself.
Mhm.
This is really, I mean, the version of this today would have a lot more of these kinds of stories, right? It wouldn't be going to the gay bar, sadly. It wouldn't be cruising on the streets. It would be being catfished to get more nudes.
Right. And that's really like the only, I kind of make fun of people when they're like, oh, everyone's fake on Grindr, or like everybody's a catfish. And I don't think that's true, but this is like the one experience I had like that.
Well, and I suppose part of being hot is people think that you're a rare commodity which they should try to exploit as quickly and schemingly as possible. He has this whole thing, about like going to the bar and people giving him attitude, either by being kind of cringing and servile and wanting, or being cold and distant. And certainly there was a beautiful blonde twunk guy at my tiny college, like 1,000 people, Central Arkansas. There may be 40 gay guys. So one, where you were in the hierarchy of attractiveness and dateability was pretty clear. Like, who would be into you? Who would you be into? And I haven't had like many experiences of painful, I've had maybe 3 or 4 painful, unrequited longings for people that are based on like really knowing them. This guy, Zach Person, if you're listening, hope you're fat now. No, I hope you're thriving. Hope you're thriving. But he was like so happy and carefree, and as the kids say now, like golden retriever energy. Had like beautiful sculpted but not too sculpted body. So he had that right, like I'm hot but I'm not like worried about how I look seemingly thing.
Yeah.
I could not be normal around him. Like interacting with him was like always this painful. I'm like looking for the thing to dislike. This is also a theme of, this comes up in Dancer from the Dance, like wanting to find out there's something wrong with the hot guy.
Hot person, so that you can not feel bad about it.
Kind of spoiled him. But it's hard. And he had a boyfriend who was no more attractive than me. So that was the real, well, I don't know that I would have known what to do with him. I'm sure he was like, verse or something. So it would never have worked. But
well, anyway, you brought up the subject of, I mentioned a couple of times, hierarchy and hotness sort of raises the question of some people having it and other people not. Like that creates a situation of inequality. And that is something that has been, hotness is both undeniably central to modern gay identity and culture. Like no one would deny that. And at the same time, it's been this perpetually kind of troubled or controversial aspect of gay life, even among gays. And like it's something that people perennially criticize and politicize in different ways. So I want to talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, and this is one of the big sources of I think gay men's friction with lesbians, with feminists. There's like friction around porn, there's friction around promiscuity. But I saw you had a recent post, thinking about hotness and thinking about the discourse on hotness today. And I didn't read all. There were some very long-winded, upset comments, but one, which several paragraphs, I couldn't read all of it, but this woman, maybe trans, saying, the problem with your approach, David, is that we have to realize we're all hot. And, that from my experience, that is just not, would that were true.
But well, let's explain, like why does hotness, from your perspective, like just for people who might not know what that means, why would hotness and like gay men's kind of fascination with it, why would that cause conflict with, say, feminists?
Well, so, for very valid reasons, feminists throughout, the many waves of feminism have wanted to critique, resist, undo the way that women are valued chiefly as physical commodities. Women are, valued for their looks, for their sexual availability. And truly, like in the 70s, the concept of looksism was like big in second wave feminism. And professionally, like for women in the workplace, it's not just that like sexually and romantically men treat you as a visual object, and that in the media, like, women are not presented as full human beings, but that, even in the workplace, hot girls are getting ahead, more than
and explicitly like that. If you're being hired to be, an airline stewardess or something like that, it's not even secret. It's explicitly like, this is what you're supposed to look like.
Yeah. And I mean, there were attempts to enshrine like anti-looksism, into the law or to organize women, that was never quite successful. But right, this is a real site of discrimination for women in their lives. And so it makes sense that feminism, in the 70s and since has been concerned about this. Although since then, I mean, what the feminist line on women being hot is, has moved around. But at the time of Christopher Street, this is maybe a high point of women feeling like they have to challenge and reject beauty standards. And I think there's also a broader leftist wish, which is in many ways right and humane and understandable, to give esteem and recognition to everyone on the basis of our common humanity. Right? Like we're all instances of human being. We're all children of God. We're all bearers of human rights. We all
Which
deserve to
is
be treated well.
which
And
a contemporary version, which body positivity is probably like a contemporary version of that, like that, that health does not, health and thinness don't necessarily go together. You can, be unhealthy and thin, and like all these equations of things that are good, like it's both healthy and attractive to be thin, but you can be healthy and not be thin. And it's things like that.
I think there's been a lot in the
And
past.
also, that's the we are all hot. We are all hot. Like everyone should just love their body the way it is, and we shouldn't have beauty standards because they are like they're a kind of imposition of capitalism or marketing, some things like that.
And truly, I mean, we know that the ability to have a romantic partner, the ability to have friends, the ability to advance in your workplace, the ability to tell yourself a satisfying story about yourself, all of these are like important to what we consider to be the good life. And all of them are related to physical attractiveness, which is unevenly distributed and also to some extent is about changeable social norms. And so a campaign to change those norms in a radical way where everyone would have access to like the good feelings of attractiveness and to like the social goods of attractiveness. So there's this great Vice or BuzzFeed thing from several years ago. Why can't my fabulous non-binary friends get laid? About Alok Vaidyamenon and some really ugly non-binary people. And one, I don't even know if they weren't getting laid. So it seemed very mean-spirited of the woman who wrote it. Everyone should be able to feel good about themselves. Everyone should be able to get laid if they want to. Everyone should be able to have a romantic relationship. And that's in friction both with certain enduring biological realities that maybe are not amenable to change. And it's also in tension with maybe the aesthetic dimension of gay culture. So
yeah, and so let's say more about that. Like, what is there something about this that is particularly, they talk about this? Yeah, maybe let's just read that that bit of the interview where they talk about this. So the hot guy being interviewed has been married to a woman before, and he's sort of recently come out and become like plunged into gay life. And so George Stambolian is asking him about the difference between having sex with men and women, and if there's differences in the way that that men and women think about like male attractiveness or beauty. So he says, the straight women I've talked to about male beauty seem to like slender men who are not overly developed or have anything in excess, which corresponds to this modern social media discourse about like women like the guy that's like a little bit chubby and not the one that has abs. They also pay more attention to things like hair and teeth. When I came into the gay community, I found that they liked something a little more exaggerated, more muscles, a tighter fit. They were more specific and demanding and seemed to want more artistic beauty. Women don't get off on the statue of David the way that men do. So there's this idea that like maybe this is a version of the mythical but still somewhat obviously true like men are visual thing, or this idea that like gay men are uniquely aesthetic as a culture. What do you think about that?
I mean, I think there's both in the sexual domain. So there's a long kind of story about homosexual men as a kind of spiritual and cultural elite from at least the 19th century. I mean, you see this in Germany around Der Eigene. You see this in Britain in the late 19th century in like the aesthetic circle of Walter Pater and people like Oscar Wilde. And it doesn't have to be sexual, right? Some of it can be like routed through celibacy and sublimation that gay men are like these wonderful
and let me
dandies.
just say, as an example, not this Russian novel Wings by Mikhail Kuzmin, it's well known among literature people, but not as well known as among gay readers as something like A Picture of Dorian Gray is. But it's very similar. It's, influenced by Wilde's kind of decadent, this idea of like the gay men in the book are this sort of, they come together and they talk about ideas and beauty and the Greeks and, stuff like that. And they very much see themselves as this kind of elite who are outside of society, and they're better than everyone else. And unlike Wilde and Dorian Gray, in this book, like it's explicit about that, this being a homosexual thing, and part of the main character, the teen boy's journey is like going from this idealized kind of platonic, non-sexual version of a homosexual elite to embracing his sexual desire and his body.
And even in the interview, you see there's both like the sculpting of the body, which is somehow informed by like the artistic ideal of the David, and also this guy is taking photos of himself, his partner is taking photos. So there's this connection between art as this enterprise, like pursuing beauty and making yourself into the beautiful thing, this self-objectification. And
yeah,
this is in an interesting tension or relationship with like another dimension of homosexuality and gay life, which is like, at least since Whitman, there's been another kind of powerful fantasy, and I think to some extent a reality of, you can go have sex with a hobo in the street, right? If you're in a railway car with someone, you can get off with them. You can get off, with someone at the docks right now. Like Whitman talks about this, like, throughout Leaves of Grass and other poems, through like a fantasy of adhesion. He has all these sort of cruising fantasies where he can like, have sex with anyone, anywhere. And it's this great democratic, egalitarian way of being connected to all these people, sexual energies flowing around. And, I had this realization, not even about gay people, but, when I realized that like the gross people in like the Dungeons and Dragons club in college were fucking, that they were having like, at least as much sex as the hot people, right? That actually there's all of this sex that's going around. And that, if you go to the bathhouse, if you get on the apps, like,
yeah, right.
You can experience it doubly in a strange way as this really intense hierarchical system where some people have made themselves super beautiful and are unobtainable, and you'd pay any amount of money to get a whiff of their undies, but also all of these guys are hooking up right now.
Yeah. Like you could be a late career Andrew Holleran who has these like very wistful, yearning, sad descriptions of bathhouses and like being an old man at a bathhouse and being invisible, or you can go to an actual bathhouse where where a whole cabal of those old men are chasing around like everyone, who's under 50. And I'll just say, like, yes, any setting like that, a bathhouse, an after party, any group sex environment, it can be a place of discomfort and painful rejection, but it can also be a place where the very environment of collectiveness, of like the fact that it's so many people, it's not this case like where you both chose each other off Grindr and like, or it's just you two. It's like, it's a different environment where like the collective nature of it somewhat takes over, and like it sometimes overrules, whether you find a specific person attractive or not.
Well, are you an orgy guy, David? Have we talked?
It's been a while, but yeah, like, I mean, I can be.
I had some group sex in college, and I came away strongly with the feeling that there's too many balls in the air, one, and that maybe if you're at the Peter Thiel pool party and it's like rigorously, like he has like the assistant screening everyone. I mean, I wouldn't make the cut, but there were too many people I didn't want to see. So I mean, maybe it was too democratic.
Yeah, like it's kind of, my experience is like you never know, like when. So I've been to like organized ones in New York, like where you buy tickets and stuff, and just for whatever reason, like didn't have a good time, like just was off that night, like drugs were not right or something. And then other times where it just like, was unexpected and like people just, ended up happening, and it was really fun and surprising. Like, so it really depends.
I mean, there's a kind of not quite a debate, rival positions taken up. Samuel Delaney has a sort of fantasia in Times Square Red, Times Square Blue about the democratic power of the bathhouse, the porno theater in like grimy old New York, where, people are jacking each other off in the dark. And, you might be having sex with a lawyer even though you're a bum. And Bersani in Homos, or one of his later books, quotes this passage, and he's like, nothing is less democratic than a bathhouse. Now, at that time, Bersani was like an old man in his 60s, so maybe he wasn't getting with the people he wanted to be with. I don't know. But there is like, this is enduringly a dichotomy we can imagine about gay sex, right? That like everyone has access to all of the sex. It's so easy to get laid, even with people who you might think of as out of your league. On the other hand, people can be very conscious of, I am more beautiful than this person. I am intimidated by this person.
Or even as like sex is like unusually available to gay men. I think we can safely say that. And if you are out there looking for it, if you're putting yourself out there, quote unquote, in the contemporary phrase, you're going to find it. At the same time, there's all of this, this temptation to discourse about like how exclusive everything is and how like I'm too ugly to do this. And so it's like both of these things are coexisting.
And I think, people really enjoy, we don't need to talk about the Daniel Leffert story necessarily, but this recent Daniel Leffert story in Yale Review, the failing Yale Review, as Trump would say.
The failing Yale Review.
Which is like a real, I think not very well written little like dystopian vision of like cruel hierarchy and exclusivity among like A-list gays in New York. And I think people really like, I don't know if you've seen this meme that lives in my head. It's famous to me, of like the queer iceberg. So there's this iceberg where like
the
part above the water.
I remember you writing a post about that.
Yeah. It's like the hot
explain what it is. So
okay, so on the floaty above water part of the iceberg, there's like the buff guys in harnesses who are mostly white and are like partying.
This is the Atlantis cruise,
and then clinging to the iceberg under the water, trying to claw their way up before they drown, is like the disabled person, the fat person, the woman in the hijab, all of the wretched of the LGBTQ plus category.
Uh-huh.
And I think something like that, it lives in my head because I think it's funny, but I think that is a real affective engine for a lot of people. Like, someone is having a better time than me. Some awful gay is at the top of the iceberg. And if only that were me.
Yeah. And it's a weird thing because like I've been around those people. I've heard the things that they say. Like I know how mean they can be and how the exclusive language that can come out. But at the same time, I've also seen those people be like, very high on Molly and very friendly and like kind of open to whoever talks to them. And so
David says, get the hot guys while they're fucked up on drugs. Yes, they won't notice how ugly you are. It's dark. They're confused. They're dehydrated.
That is my number one pro tip. But anyway, so let's just say like, so we have these perennial discourses of, that I, reflexively, I find very annoying about, looksism. It was called at one point body fascism, which,
that makes it hot. I'm sorry.
To be honest, it's like just one of the most vapid concepts I've ever heard. Let's just say
I liked Jack Parlett's book about Fire Island, but he got a chapter about body fascism at Fire Island, and it's like, yeah, you had a bad time if you were ugly. That's true of literally anywhere.
Is there any let's steel man these ideas. Is there anything to it? Is there anything that is worth criticizing about gay male like hierarchicalism or like obsession with aesthetics and beauty? Like, is there any way that that's toxic that we
should? Sure. I mean, for sure, surely it can be self-destructive. One way to think of it though is like, do these people feel that way about being smart? Do they feel that way about, like, I love Paris is Burning. I mean, I've seen it so many times. And I love this scene where the girls are talking about how, like, I want to get out there and make the other girls feel like shit. That is what being beautiful is about. And other moments in the documentary, they're like, this is for all of us to create a safe space and have fun with our identities and dismantle structures.
Yes.
There are other moments, like, and then there are other moments where the girls are like, I am hot and you're disgusting. Like when, oh my God, who's like the really fishy one who gets murdered? I can't believe I am blanking on her name. When she's like, touch this skin, touch all this skin.
She went back to be a man.
Oh, you went back to being a man. Touch this skin, darling.
touch this skin, honey. Touch all of this skin. Okay? You just can't take it. You're just an overgrown orangutan.
Such a new gay that I've only seen the derivative pose. I have not seen actual Paris
No,
is Burning.
you must be rewatching endlessly. That's the way to get assimilated. But where was this going? Is that even within drag, right? There's both the narrative
Yes.
of we're all in it together, all the drag is valid. This is us together against the heterosexist structures that we're trying to dismantle. And then also it's a competition, and I'm
then there's
beautiful
Plain
and you're
Jane.
not.
There's Plain Jane from Boston. I don't know if you saw her season where
where
she famously says, one of these bad drag queens says, protect queer art. He does this very sappy protect queer art. And Plain Jane is like, the question is, is it really worth protecting? Like,
Poor Megami,
should we be
this
protecting queer?
chunky Brooklyn queen. I still watch Drag Race. That's how busted I am.
Well, I watched that season because of Plain Jane, but
Boston Girls. When we need to wrap up in a minute.
So we have these two things that they seem kind of opposite, but somehow they go together. Like this sort of kind of meanness and hierarchicalism, and like, we're the hot people and you're not. It can be competitive, but at the same time, like from another angle, or even at the same time, there's a sort of collectiveness about it.
And so the interview even ends with Stambolian looking at a photo of the guy saying, "Here we have an image of you as a god." And the guy responds, "Here I am a god. We're all gods at some time." And Stambolian's like, "Yeah, but okay, not all of us so often." And Ian's like, "Well, okay, I'm one of the fortunate ones." And then that's the conclusion. I mean, this is maybe beyond the scope of this conversation, but I do think, as two people who think of ourselves as like smart, literate, cultured, whatever, I certainly have my ego trip and like my sense of superiority in the ways that I might deliciously enjoy humiliating other people. Society gives you more of a pass around those non-physical ones, right? There's something about like physical hotness that like the unfairness of it like seems to especially light people up.
Right. Yeah. And people especially want to make you a villain or to buy tickets to your downfall.
I like that phrase. Yes. I mean,
it is a what's his name? Machine Gun Kelly album title.
Wow. That was because you did the rounds of straight culture. I was not expecting that reference. Venus Extravaganza. That was her name. So, okay. Now it's come back to me. And can we wrap up with that? Can that be a conclusion? David's surprising Machine Gun Kelly.
Yeah. Okay. Let's do I feel like we should wrap up with kind of a takeaway. So like, what's your best stab at like, can we reconcile these things? Like, can we lean into our like love of hotness and aesthetic beauty, or like, is there a way that that's not fascist? Like, can we still be democratic and like
what's interesting to me is like somehow almost all of our apparently insuperable intellectual dilemmas that like at the level of theory should be impossible to resolve.
Yeah, right.
Actually, in real life, I mean, I think, in any one good relationship, you both feel like, oh my God, I'm so lucky to be with this person. Like, I find them really hot, wonderful, admirable. I mean, this guy, we haven't talked about how he talks about his partner, but he finds his partner like incredibly hot, maybe hotter than him. He really admires him and feels like he needed to like step up his whole life to be with this person. And I think like that's what, a good romantic relationship, but also like, feeling lucky to have the friends that we do. That's a wonderful aspect of gay life. But yeah, that like in any functioning relationship, we both have that like admiration, but also like this person would probably fuck any hole. So
I would hope that we can hold two things, together, that we can enjoy the quest of, reshaping our body, holding ourselves to an ideal and enjoying the process and the discipline and self-mastery that takes to become something. And even enjoy the sense of superiority that might give us, or the distinction, while also realizing that is it's just a body. It's just, physical flesh. We could get sick or ill tomorrow. It could be taken away from us. We will all get old and die someday. And that our distinction in that distinction that we achieve in that like fleshly realm is it's not unimportant. It's not necessarily shallow or vain, but it's also should not be a reason to treat other people badly or we should recognize that we're
Unless
still
they're paying for it.
right. Unless they're paying for it, unless they're asking for, unless they want to be just
Unless
a
they
whole.
say, step on me, I'm a disgusting
Yes.
worm.
Step on my face, I'm gross. I'm just a whole.
And,
Yes.
as Ocean Vuong once said, on Earth, we're briefly gorgeous.
Okay, yes. And that gives us a perfect ability to go out on this quote from another one from Mark Mirrlees, who I find is secretly a philosopher of beauty.
She's the best.
The gay novelist Mark Mirrlees, from one of the ones that I think Blake may not have read, called Man About Town.
I have not read. I'm an ignorant woman.
So the story is this, like, this guy he saw a photo when he was a teenager of an underwear model in a men's magazine. And so one of the subplots of the novel is he's trying to track down who this boy was in this underwear ad. And it's a little bit, it's kind of ridiculous and creepy. He even like feels that way himself. But as the novel goes on, he kind of leans into it and he's like, you know what? I want to do this. My life's falling apart. This is what I want to do. So he ends up like locating this guy and like, having a conversation with him about like why he did this and what it meant to both what this guy who was not famous, was not even a model. He just happened to, take this one underwear ad. And then, so now they're both kind of older men. And this is what the guy says.
Petrus had radiated beauty one day in 1963, and in 1964, Joel had caught a glimpse of it, like a man watching from light years away the flash of a star that had died eons ago. By the time Joel saw it, it was already gone. But that's what people were here for, the only reason we were put on the planet at all, so that a star that flared and died 1 billion years before we were born would not pass away unobserved. And I love that because it reminds us of our fleeting time on Earth, that we are here to be beautiful and that we never know who's going to see it and who is meant to see it and be inspired by it.
To quote you quoting the Bible, we came not to be served, but to serve.